she said they did it while she was little, surgery completely out of it. And they adapted her heart and she knows.
Exactly, like, you're exactly as mother but she wasn't in the ER. She kept claiming she had heartburn. And finally, like, why don't you go get this checked out? And she was like slowly having a heart attack. And if they wouldn't have brought her, she probably would have died that night. Like,
how do you go from just like healthy to
yeah, she was having a heartburn. Is what she kept telling me.
she's like go to the gym every morning.
And you can say you can vegetarian.
Yeah.
Like super healthy, like weird and hard, like
Yeah, they said it was genetic.
yes, and after they said it was just genetics, and it was a matter of time, and if she wouldn't have gone, she would have probably gone to even hate that.
You process it. There. Oh, ma'am.
Hello, my dear. How are you?
Good, good to see you. Oh, you're fine. Good to see you.
We're in the state.
You too.
Right, exactly.
Oh.
I will. I will.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad you made it safely.
I'm asking for one of these for Chris. Your friend for the day? Okay. Yeah, I bet.
It's the best.
Mhm.
I got so many compliments on it.
Great. Very happy you're here. Thank you. I agree. I didn't get to speak to you last time, so I'm just gonna hug your neck real quick. Good. Yeah. How y'all doing? I'm good.
Right on the advancement side, I've moved out of the training, so,
You're not gonna be training.
and I don't think Courtney is, I think you'll get, two of our early childhood specialists, Ashley and Julie. Okay, they're great. Yeah. New school year's kicked off, I know y'all.
Well, yeah, but, formally it's gonna be next Tuesday.
Okay,
But yeah, but you know, everybody's
That's,
got their new class and they're like, oh gosh, they don't know anything anymore.
You're starting off.
you know how that's like always a surprise every year
You
to
forget.
teachers? It's like, yeah, you're, it's the same thing every year. Take a breath.
Like childbirth, God lets you forget, so you come back the next year. Lets you forget, so you do it again. Childbirth.
That's a good, that's a good one. I'm gonna use that.
There you go. All those other wonderful things you do.
It's counted or discredited with a few transportation issues.
Perfect. Yeah. That's my favorite.
Still,
Yeah.
Okay. Huh? Have anything yet? It'll be fun. I don't know. Like it was big. Yeah, so with traffic closed. Okay. For me, five. So.
I may do that myself, but I'm not going to it.
We love that.
Is that
Yes. Actually, no. I was gonna get.
Yeah, when we were in Tanzania, I thought,
Yeah.
speaking of,
Yeah. Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody
Yeah. Low on the priority list.
Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see you here. And I knew we had a full house based on the parking lot. It's crazy out there. I want to say on behalf of the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission, this meeting is called to order. We are live streaming today's meeting. So throughout the discussion, if you have a comment or need the attention of the body, if you'd make sure you're on the microphone so that it would live stream. And we're going to begin today with, I'm going to call on Dr. Vicki Silas to call the roll. Dr. Silas, where is she?
here?
Dr. Craig, Dr. DiCarlo, Ms. Dugas, Representative Edmiston. Here. Ms. Emery. Here. Ms. Fisher. Representative Freiberg. Here. Mr. Garvey. Here. Ms. Goodell. Dr. Gray. Ms. Rio.
Hello? Yes.
Mr. Barisco. Ms. Hilbert Mitchell. Ms. Hughes.
Here.
Kaufman.
Here.
Here.
Ms. Robinson? Ms. Rose? Dr. Sonia? Ms. Dilly? Dr. Terrio? Mr. Tipton? Mr. Thomas? Ms. Thompson? Ms. Torian? Ms. Blanco? Ms. McNair? Mr. Wahid? Ms. Warren? And Ms. Wilcox?
And we've had a few join since you began the roll call. So I think we have Dr. Gray and Dr. Craig and a proxy.
For Susanna Bergeron.
Thank you.
And knowing that we've got a large number of new members in the commission, if we could very quickly go around the table, if you would introduce yourself and even more than who you represent, but what that stakeholder means in regard to the role on the commission. I think that would be helpful. So if we could start, Ms. McDaniel.
Representative Kathy Edmonston.
Thank you.
Parish schools. Again, this is very critical because this provides a foundation for everything that we do that comes to K-12 after that. So it's very important that we take a hard look at what we're doing for our earliest learners and hopefully provide the best opportunities for them to be successful in the future.
I'm Diana Singleton. I'm here as proxy for Crystal Hilliard Mitchell. Crystal is the executive director for the Louisiana Alliance of Children's Advocacy Centers, which works to support all of the children's advocacy centers across the country. Nancy Ryan. I'm with the Louisiana Educational Television Authority, otherwise known as LTV. I'm the education director, and we serve the entire state. We reach the whole state with broadcast television for free for everyone. We play a critical role in education. Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Silly, and I'm the superintendent of K-12 for the school system, whereby we look every day at how we can service more children born under to prepare them for that as third grade literacy grade that we're working on trying to do. So I'm here as superintendent, but also as a grandmother, of public system, how we
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Martin Thomas. I was appointed by Governor Jeff Langley, and I'm the early childhood teacher at the
So I definitely have good out there in the rural area, and also a plan of Hello, everyone. My name is Monique Williams. I'm a provider and owner of 3 childcare centers, 1 in New Orleans and 2 in Dexter Parish. So, and I am the president of Childcare Coalition, which is an advocacy group for providers for the region. And I am here as a provider, of course, and also as an advocate for everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Emery. I'm representing the Child Care Association of Louisiana. We're also an advocacy organization that represents type 1, 2, and 3 providers, family day homes. And I'm also a provider, type 3 provider, 5 centers, 3 standalone centers, and 2 micro centers inside of East Baton Parish.
My name is Farishay Perkins. I'm the executive director of Point Capiz Early Childhood Coalition. I'm here as a parent representative with a 2 year-old in type 3 childcare.
Thank you.
My name is Farishay Perkins. I'm the executive director of Point Capiz Early Childhood Coalition. I'm here as a parent representative with a 2 year-old in type 3 childcare.
Thank you.
literacy-focused nonprofit here in Louisiana. We provide advocacy, training, support, family and community engagement. So we're here kind of for a bunch of different regions and branches and just seeing how we can help support our earliest learners and everyone who touches them.
Good afternoon. I'm Kyrie Wahid. I represent Head Start Collaboration Office. We're housed here in the Department of Education. Our major focus is to work with those agencies who provide services to low-income children and families. And since we're talking education, K-12, pre-K, childcare, and Head Start, to see what we can do collectively to expand our service day and the quality of services that we deliver here in the state.
Hello, I'm Monique Scott Spalding. I currently am the Administrative Director for Workforce Development in East Baton Rouge Parish School System, but I'm here representing the business community. I've been an entrepreneur in the city for 32 years. Surely I started when I was 2, and happy to serve on the commission to be able to support early childhood care and education.
Good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Robinson. I work here at the department as the 619 coordinator for young children with disabilities. I do all things compliance for OSEP reporting and anything for professional development for young children with disabilities and service provision.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Susanna Craig with the Louisiana Board of Regents. I'm Deputy Commissioner of Higher Education, focusing on strategic planning and student success. In our Teacher and Leadership Initiatives Office, we have an early childhood specialist and section, and we've been working directly with institutions of higher education to remove barriers to student success, specifically for those student parents. And so really happy to be here today. See if we can do this.
My name is Leanne Price. I own a Type 3 center in Rapides Parish, and I'm representing that today, representing childcare centers.
Angela Grow with Louisiana State University Eunice, representing the community college in research best practices and teacher preparation programs.
I'm Danny McConnell. I'm proxy for Mark Bond, who is the Workforce Initiatives Director for LED Fast Start.
Good afternoon. My name is Conrad Appel. I am the Bessie representative here, and welcome to my close friend, Senator Mizell.
Hello, Jim Garvey. I started my work on trying to improve early childhood education in Louisiana through my 16 years on Bessie. I'm currently the executive counsel for the Louisiana Workforce Commission, and I can say that our secretary, Susie Showen, sees the lack of universal child care as a serious impediment to getting more women into our workforce. So she takes it very seriously.
Dr. Tim Magner, I'm the president of the Greater Shreveport Chamber of Commerce in Shreveport, and also the incoming president for the Louisiana Association of Chamber Executives. And we're here because childcare is the backbone of our workforce and the backbone of our economy. So we want to make sure that we're able to provide as much opportunity as we can to families who need it.
Libby Saunier, Executive Director of the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization squarely focused on children birth to 4 in our state. So that we have a successful Louisiana, we must have successful children. We do a fair amount of policy work, research, and data to really lead towards evidence-based practices.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mary Beth Hughes, representing Lobby. We serve as the state's Chamber of Commerce and are enthusiastic about early childhood education. And I want to thank Representative Freiberg for her legislation to put us on this commission. This is an issue that over the past couple of years, we have really seen the divide between business, workforce, and early childhood, and how important it is to bridge that gap. So we're very excited about this commission and the work that it will do.
My name is Shane Bates. Good afternoon. My name is Shane Bates. I serve as the Legislative and Policy Manager for the Bureau of Family Health that sits within the Office of Public Health. We provide the Title V maternal and child health programs throughout the state of Louisiana, and specifically one of the programs we provide is maternal, infant, early and childhood home visiting programming.
New addition.
Good afternoon, Karen Austin with the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services. I represent DCFS, which is our public child welfare agency, and I'm the manager over foster care, transitioning youth, and the ICPC compact administrator.
Thank you all. I'm going to tell you, we've got such a brain trust in here that I can't imagine there's a problem we can't solve before we walk out of here. So thank you all for taking your time, and I'm going to hand it off to my friend and colleague.
Again, as co-chair, I want to welcome everyone here today. And like Jim Garvey, I've been working on this issue for over 16 years. And I believe, as Beth said, we can do it and we will do it. We're going to find a way to do it, and that's what we're here for. Last meeting, we did not have a quorum, but we did take notes, not official minutes, I guess is what you're telling me. And so we need any suggestions to the notes that were taken at the last meeting? I see none. All right, we'll move then to the next agenda item, and I'll need to get a motion to receive the September 2024 Early Childhood Care and Education Commission Report Draft. Do I have a motion to receive the draft?
So moved. Monique Scott Spalding.
Monique Spalding moved, seconded. Jim Garvey. Okay, at this time, I will turn it over to the two experts here today. Karen Powell, who is Deputy Assistant Superintendent, and Malin Baker, who is Assistant Superintendent of Early Childhood Care and Education, to talk about the draft and discuss what we've proposed.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg and Senator Mizell. So just to frame the discussion today, we just wanted to remind commission members of what the charge of the commission is. So in 2022, legislation permanently reauthorized this commission and charged this commission to study and make recommendations relative to establishing a vision for the future of early childhood care and education in Louisiana. And second, to establish and appoint members to a task force. You can see here the task force members that have worked to come up with the recommendations and suggestions that are embedded in the report we're going to discuss today. So many thanks to them. Representative Freiberg, Senator Mizell, Stephen Barnes with the Kathleen Bobno Blanco Center at ULL, Melissa Gudo here on the commission, Ruth Lawson with the Jefferson Chamber of Commerce, Jan Moller with Invest in Louisiana, Stephen Procopio with PAR, Libby Saunier, and Michael Tipton. And so as a reminder, this year legislation, we were in a transitional year. So we submitted a report to the legislature in the spring and wanted to remind you of the content and the recommendations in that February 2024 report. So that report noted that investment in early childhood education delivers both immediate and long-term gains for the state, and recommended that the legislature invest $98 million of additional state funds in high-quality early care and education now and annually over 10 years to ensure statewide access, that the legislature enact legislation that guarantees the state's commitment to the Early Childhood Education Fund to match and incentivize ongoing and increasing levels of local investment, and finally, to continue to review state and local revenue and resources to identify potential sustainable funding for early care and education. So now in this transition year, we will be moving the timeline for the report to the fall. We'll be submitting just for this year a second report to the legislature in September. And that is the report draft that we have to discuss with all of you today.
So we're going to do a little bit of a paper shuffle. So I appreciate that so many of you are right now looking at the PowerPoint, but we're now going to kind of transition to fully looking at the draft itself. And so in your packets, and it does have a very large draft watermark, we're going to spend some time going page by page through this report. So I'll give you a second to shuffle to that page because we're going to go section by section. So I'm going to divert from the PowerPoint into this. And so to begin, I definitely want to note my role in this as working to facilitate the discussion. I think the uniqueness of this particular draft report is some of you, this is the first commission meeting that you have been to. And I definitely want to acknowledge that there has been many different conversations leading up to this in the work of the task force, as well as the previous commission meetings. For those of you who are at our July meeting, that was a very high-level discussion as it related to some of the feedback from the task force that really went into the shaping of this first draft. Ultimately, our goal is to leave here with your feedback to incorporate and then to submit this by its legislative deadline in September. And so I just want to acknowledge the uniqueness of a few of you who this is your first time joining us and in this discussion. But today is really about facilitating this discussion and having you lead your feedback, as well as we're supporting our co-chairs in ultimately our goal is to get your feedback and then submit a draft in September. I will note my role in the facilitation aspect. We went around and we said introductions. Both Karen and I are here representing the department, and we definitely want to acknowledge that this is the commission's report. And so whatever the legislature appropriates, the Louisiana Department of Education is there to take that appropriation of whatever is noted, but just noting we're here from the facilitation standpoint, listening to your feedback. And so to begin, I'm going to go dive into the report. I'm going to start in the first section. The first thing I want to voice over is there is going to be a title page. It's not going to go straight into content. And I am going to give you a sneak peek of what some of that graphic design is looking at. I do want to acknowledge that last meeting we did a little Zoom and in-person discussion, and we found the technology struggles with that. And so I'm here facilitating in person, but Lauren Sogar from Advocacy and Solutions Communications Group will be also listening in and getting some of the feedback as that primary draft. And so it will have a cover page, and it also will have a closing page acknowledging the commission and task force membership. So just wanted to voice that over. So with that, I'm going to dive right in on the first section. I'm going to be going section by section in the blue titling. So the first one is a shared vision for Louisiana's working families and children. And so this was based off of this commission's feedback, as well as the task force, to really begin to call attention to the economic impact of childcare and education. And so the first has those three components of a strong early care and education system. And then also noting that throughout this report, there are several quotes from various members of the community that the task force compiled. So thank you to the task force for sharing that. So I'm going to pause here for the first section to see what feedback is for a shared vision for Louisiana's working families and children.
So is there any way we, looking down, are we too fast? I'm sorry. Did you say
Dr.
we're going to
Craig,
read a little
You
bit?
take the lead, go for it.
Okay, so down in that one too, it's like the paragraph right after the section. It's so important, the statement that parents at all income levels can enjoy the peace of mind that comes with safe and stable care for their children. And I don't know if there's a way to highlight that with maybe a text box out to the side. I don't know that your graphic designer can figure that out, but I think that's critical to highlight.
Thank you for that.
Point of clarification, for the first two sentences, a third of the workforce of parents who need quality, the quarter of parents who are not working, that's not included in the first, I guess the fraction sentences right up next to each other. I'm not sure where the overlap is, or if they were meant to be separate.
So you're seeking clarification of the two sentences next to each other.
So, yes, so, and maybe it's just an ordering issue. I guess I'm just trying to understand. I'm seeing a pie chart in my head and I'm not sure I'm ordering those fractions
Got it.
right.
I guess, as I mentioned last time, for those who were here, I believe you have to focus this on the audience that you're trying to sell the proposal to. And to me, the audience in this case is the legislature, because that's where the funding comes from. And so, I mean, I'm looking at these two guys, they're our chairman, and I think they understand what I'm talking about. But I feel like what's important from my conversations, what's really important to the legislature is the educational aspect of childcare and not so much the childcare part. And I just feel like there's not enough emphasis in the opening paragraph because I think, remember, most legislators will probably read the first page and not get into the rest of this generally. So I think, I know I'm speaking from Bessie, our perspective. What we look at, what our goal right now is to have kids in reading at least be up to speed by the 3rd grade. We're not anywhere close to that. My attitude is if children don't start kindergarten at least partially or mostly prepared, they're never going to get up to speed in reading in the 3rd grade. And I think that's a selling point to the legislature. But yet I don't feel like, I mean, the opening paragraph talks about parents needing quality, reliable care for their young children in order to succeed at work. I'm not sure the legislature cares. That's just me. I think they're more concerned about the fact that children are not going to graduate or not going to get to the 3rd grade and be able to read. So I don't know how to reorganize this thing, but that's my comment on the first paragraph. I've got some more comments later.
I want to agree with Mr. Appel, but also say that, as you know, as a former legislator yourself, sometimes the long-term goal is hard, and that this is a workforce of today and tomorrow issue. And so the economic impact of childcare now is something that we've heard from legislators that is important to them, as well as the education piece, because we do want children to be, to be ready to learn when they enter into kindergarten and read on grade level at 3rd grade.
I agree with Libby, and I would say that economic development is, long-term, what early childhood help us with. And I think that's very important to the legislature. But I think maybe in every time we talk about child care, that we emphasize education also. And that there be a line or two about education and the importance, because I think those are the two primary things that the legislature looks at. They call it child care, okay? And they say, oh, it's just babysitting. And we want to change that notion. But we also want this notion of the 1.3 billion loss annually when parents
Well, that's fine.
can't go to work.
But I'm just saying, you got to target it to the audience, and the audience is your peers.
I think we can tie that in by driving home the fact that children cannot learn unless they feel safe and secure. Like, you have to lay all those foundations down first so that whenever they get to kindergarten and they need to begin to start reading, they already have those foundational skills done.
Another point that I think is important to the audience is the literacy rates or the proficiency rates in 3rd grade. And I've heard this several times in different venues that I've been at about how they use those proficiency rates in 3rd grade to plan jails in the future, like how big, how to plan seats, because we all know that if kids cannot read proficiently, they struggle all through their K-12 education. And then also on the workforce side, what does that look like for them in getting a job when they've struggled all through their K-12? So the literacy rates, in my perspective as a superintendent, that people ask me all the time, what keeps you up at night, Ms. Stilley? You know what keeps me up at night? The high percentage of our kids in 3rd grade that are not proficient. That's what keeps me up at night, because it has such impacts like down the road in our community, in our parish. And it literally scares me.
Sitting here for a few years, okay, highly frustrated at the very thing Mr. Appel's talking about, that speaking to the audience, we've been speaking to the audience. These ladies know we've been selling the value of early childhood education and how it's going to, take care of the literacy, the readiness for kindergarten. We've been selling that. It's not breaking through. I'm just telling you. I mean, we've been selling that, I mean, we all, I think maybe you've got people who wanted to be convinced and they're more strongly convinced and they can talk it now based on that benefit. But there's people that need, I think they want a revenue link in order to feel like they are safe making a decision to do the right thing. And that revenue link is between lack of remediation, lack of incarceration. But I think what would really help with that is if we had data that clearly showed, okay, this, and I don't know who might have it, but we've talked about this before. The return on investment from kids who have been in an early childhood setting, ready for kindergarten, their outcomes compared to those who are not. And some clear comparison of dollars and cents to drive home that, because
Well, there's a 13% return on investment for children for every dollar that, and there is clear research on that.
no, I believe it, but I'm just saying we need visuals showing the breakdown on that. Yeah.
There's definitely research, but I think for me, the piece that is right here, and it's the last sentence, childcare issues result in a $1.3 billion loss in annual Louisiana economy. So for me, I think we are losing money in our economy because we're not investing in our ECE, in our early care and education. So maybe that is, since people are not buying that ECE is the investment, maybe if we talk to our business owners or the business people at the state, that those stakeholders, maybe that is the piece that we're missing.
I think you're absolutely right. That's
Because
the buy-in we
that-
desperately need out in front of the conversation.
Because to me, if we're talking to people's pockets and saying, hey, we want to, that $1.3 billion, if we invest that, then we can turn that around and see what we can do at that point.
So I guess I have two comments and maybe questions, and some of it may be for the report drafter. So I guess for me, I'll recognize I'm novice here because I don't have near the experience many of you do. But I guess in reading this, one thing that would help me kind of frame my mind to this conversation is having some type of like opening, like executive summary or something to orient me to what this report is about. And thinking if I'm a person who's going to read this as like legislative, like, person who's going to be going to the Capitol and working on this. And I guess my other thing is hitting on some of the points others made, maybe with the data, it being more data driven, because some of the things that were said, I didn't realize that, and that might be helpful, but also maybe breaking out some of the points, like maybe not just kind of putting it all together about childcare and education, but maybe kind of separating the points and recognizing that two things are very important here, and kind of hitting that data to say, this is why this all matters, because there's this component plus that component, and maybe some connection at the end of how it all comes together. But that's just how my brain works.
I just wanted to make a comment in response to Rochelle, which I agree with everything she said, but I wonder if in the first paragraph, we could add a sentence. So after the 1.3 billion loss, we could add a sentence about employers, because our lobby members, we represent over 2,500 businesses from across the state. And besides insurance costs, this is their number one problem, is finding workforce. And I think there's a direct tie to the lack of investment in early childhood. So I wonder if that might be a good, I know we talk a lot about the economic impact on the second page, but to Mr. Appel's point, it might be good to have just an employer, because we have lots of members that have left Louisiana or moved their headquarters out of Louisiana due to workforce shortages, which I know that's nationwide, but I do think we talk a lot about the legislature not listening, but when you hear employers and economic impact, their ears kind of perk up. So that's just a suggestion.
Thank you. I do want to, from the time purposes, I do want to call out, and we will get to on page 2, we do have a quote from both a legislator and a business owner, that one of the task force members supplied as it relates to loss in productivity and loss in costs. So I am going to summarize feedback that I've heard so far based off of discussion. It sounds like there is some feedback to emphasize education in the first two sentences or so, and as it relates to just reminding the reader of the education that is occurring and the critical nature of it. There's a question in terms of how we can infuse more direct line between, to Rochelle's point, the $1.3 billion, as well as the connection to employers. To your feedback, Shane, as it relates to the executive summary, you'll notice that this is purposely very short. And I think a lot of that is based off of the feedback of the task force and this commission. It sounds like different iterations of this board have been different lengths from 10 pages to two, or excuse me, to an executive summary of 2. And so it's definitely has been it sounds like there's many ways you can approach this. And so I just wanted to be cognizant. I think they purposely were trying to condense this down to as short of an entire report as possible. So I will move us along. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Magner, go for
I was
it.
just going to say, because you're dealing with a legislature of lots of different people with different perspectives, there are going to be different messages that are going to work for different folks.
Mhm.
And the way, again, this is a design thing, but the way you've got this bulleted out, perhaps if each one of those was essentially a bullet, that's where the eye is going to get drawn. And if you included the education, the workforce components as part of that, that might, lead to better retention, but also allow you to hit each one of those audiences with a specific message.
Agreed. Okay, I am going to move us along for time purposes. Thank you for that feedback on the page 1. I'm now going to go to page 2. Practical now and in the future is the next section. And I'm going to just do the top section of this first. So this section provides and details the bullets as well as the graphics of the benefits of a strong early care and education system. And so you'll also note from Barry Beth's feedback, this also includes the quote below. So I'll take a minute to see if there's any feedback in particular as of this section. You'll also see, and we will update, that's the 1.3 in that graphic. So this is the more bulleted version of some of the components that were also in the first page. So I'll pause there for any feedback on that section. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, the folks who represent the school systems here, do you see yourselves as a constituency here? And is it the impact, as you pointed out, Dr. Gray, the impact that early childhood has on the structure of the K-12 system or the capacity of the K-12 system? Is that an audience that should be called out as a bullet here as a beneficiary from a strong early childhood system? The K-12 education, the school systems.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, and I'm hearing everything that's being discussed today, and there are so many points to address. And not to go backwards, but if we don't buy into it and try to figure out how to support it, then we're only hurting ourselves. When we see kids coming up from a sound early childhood program into pre-K or into kindergarten, there's a stark difference between what they're able to do on day 1 versus those that don't attend. And you look at the population that really is hurt the most, is usually the most disenfranchised populations. And so although you all have early childhood offerings in those communities, they still do not go. And so if we can find a way to kind of get that part going, it helps us out that much more. So yes, getting our school system as part of that group to be targeted, I think that's a win.
So in this section on our communities, maybe further spelling out kindergarten readiness, something of that effect. Okay. If there is no further feedback in that section, oh, go for it. Yes. Mhm. Great point. And we're going to get to somewhat of a pie chart on the next page. Yes.
Employing all of these different segments here, I will probably want to know, and I'm sure other people will probably want to know, who's going to make a decision on it, to see how much does that impact. In the beginning, it says 1.2 billion return on that investment. That's huge, so that's not highlighting it. For what about the other things here? And I'm just curious about what would be the cost, or if anyone knows the cost of the youth incarceration when children are not getting early education or in a sound quality
environment when they're young. Because I've done the research on it. I have not done it recently, but I'm just eager to know how much money is being spent on that rather than early and to see the barrier.
Longitudinal data systems, that's a very complex, multi-layered question that I cannot answer at this moment in time, but I would say it's definitely a long-term longitudinal data system would need to that type of data. I'm curious if other states have approached that.
Also say like if we just look at what it costs for a child to be in the juvenile justice system, I
Mhm.
think, is that your point, like to look
Got
at
it.
the comparison?
So I know y'all had in the February report a graphic that had return on investment, one with an arrow showing downward as it relates to criminal activity, something of that effect. So it,
Cares about economic possession money.
Mhm.
I also cares about crime.
Mhm.
Could I speak back to your point of the kindergarten readiness? You know, a lot of times when we say kindergarten readiness, people tend to just think that that means, you know, learning 3 shapes, learning a few letters and sounds. And, you know, the impact of that, if it could somehow be explained like learning a new sport, when you have a child that comes in from an early learning center, they have so many skills. I mean, even being able to walk to the lunchroom, being able to sit in morning circle and being able to talk and share with friends and navigate those. If there was a way to kind of try to explain that, because people just kind of override that and think it's just simple, and it's not. It's like a child walking in to a new environment, and one child has about 40 skills and one child has 0. So that one child that has not been anywhere, that one child that has not been exposed is all of a sudden learning all of these new skills and is so overwhelmed. So, you know, describing that you know, learning to play golf, when a kid kind of knows how to play golf or knows how to play soccer and they just go to a coach for one tip. And then you have the child that knows nothing, that needs to learn everything from the ground up. And I think that kindergarten readiness term is just glazed over and think that that's not really that much. And it really is huge what children learn in early learning centers. We could communicate that better.
We're already on page 2, and I thought by now we would mention that we're asking for funding. We want to mention how a kid has the ability to learn in early childhood. So we need to mention how a child's brain is 80 to 90% developed by the age of 4, so that the legislature knows that, hey, we're not just spending money for for kids to play with blocks in these centers. They're actually learning and they can retain this information because their brains are 80, 90% developed by the age 4. So I think that's very important to be mentioned early on in the document.
#1 line every year. Old print and it hasn't worked. So just
No impact.
say.
I'm just telling you, I mean, we're all
#1
sold
line.
here. There has got to be because even, and you're gonna kill me, but I mean, when I go back to the first paragraph, that 1.3 billion loss annually is pie in the sky.
Like that needs to be the first sentence.
Yeah.
But it's still, but based on what? I mean, the legislators are gonna say 1.3 billion loss, okay, we don't have it, how are we gonna lose it? I mean, how much are we gonna have the thinking, we gotta be real, okay? The thinking is, we're spending a tremendous amount of money to invest in early childhood already. People in high positions laugh at me when I say we're not investing as we should. I'm just telling you, so there's gonna have to be like something, almost like a magical, something that strikes the tone. We all know, I just don't see, you're talking to people who are not gonna get warm and fuzzy about a child's brain. They're not gonna get warm and fuzzy about, they're gonna get warm and fuzzy if they know it's gonna save us money from a kid having to have remediation and incarceration.
So to me,
Or
it's just like, why are companies not knocking down Louisiana doors to build here? Why are they not coming to stay here? So is it the education system? Like, the fact is that for me, we should be in the infrastructure bill, right? Early care and education should be in infrastructure. Because why are people, when it's time for them to have children, they leave? Because the education system is not what it needs to be, right? So my thing is this, and this is what I keep saying, is that just like you don't want to get on I-10 and the road is not stable. Well, that's where we are. Our education system is not stable. We have to build it up because it's the infrastructure. ECE is the infrastructure. We are building all of those synapses. And I know y'all, I'm preaching to the choir, right? But in order for us to be the next Silicon Valley, we have to make sure that ECE, our education department, is where people want to send their children to stay here, right? So we have to invest those dollars. We have to do that so that all of the other companies want to stay here and put their dollars. So that's the way I think about it. So we're losing $1.3 billion and we're not getting $50 more billion because we're not where the education is priority. That's my thought.
I got one more. Are we on the second part of page 2? I'm lost. Are we just on page 2?
We are on page 2, about to talk about funding, but Mr. Appel, please
No,
feel
this
free
is
to.
just to follow up on my theme of addressing the audience, which in my case is the legislature. What I think is missing here is, and it's exactly what Senator Mizell just saying. It's what is the causation? What are we trying to solve? And I wrote down a few notes, and some of these statistics may not be right, but I think they're pretty close. About 70% of the children in traditional public schools in Louisiana come from poverty. About 70% of minority kids, and I think 36 or 38% of non-minority kids come from homes without fathers. A lot of the kids who enter the public school system come from homes, whether they have a full traditional family or not, they come from homes where the parents were either not educated or grossly undereducated and therefore incapable of bringing their children up to that level that Dr. Gray was talking about. I mean, that's just a few of them, and I'm sure there's others, but to me, the message to the legislature needs to be, this is the problem. It's not, we can't solve this. It's a societal problem. It's very deep and it's not something that we can touch, really. The only solution, if we want to get children that education, if we want to get out of being in the now 40th or 42nd place in the country, is to give them a head start. And the way you give them a head start is to get them out of those circumstances that I described, to break the cycle. And the only way to break the cycle is early childhood education. There is no other alternative. So all I'm saying is, if you had some points, what is the causation? What are we trying to accomplish? And what are our alternatives? Because there really are no others. That's it.
I also think there's an aspirational component to this that kind of dovetails with what Mr. Appel is saying. And that's the competitive argument. When you look at other states that we unfavorably compare to from an economic development standpoint, many of them are investing at a high level, at a systemic level in early childhood education. And this has become table stakes now for participating in the global economy. And a lot of the rhetoric that's come out in the last 8 months from the legislature and the governor has been about competition, has been about raising our profile as a state, as an economic competitor. These are table stakes now for economic competitiveness, is having an early childhood education system that is well-funded. And so it becomes both practical and aspirational.
Children who cannot go back to school or get a job.
We have a 57% labor force participation rate. Yeah.
All at that table.
I have to go back. Oh, go ahead.
These lines, I don't see anything in this report that talks about what other states are doing, particularly the states that we typically think of as competitors, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Arkansas. If we, put numbers from those states in there, how much money are they investing per year? It may answer, may motivate.
Jim, Libby might disagree, and she knows more than I, but I've been studying this for 2 years, and I can tell you, I don't believe there are any states who have solved this issue and are doing well with it. Everyone is struggling with this right now, but Libby could correct me.
Well, then don't tell the legislators that.
But I agree with Senator Pell that return on investment, economic development, the money is what they are interested in and how it is. But see, I've never heard a clear, precise return on investment for early childhood in Louisiana. I've heard national numbers, but I've never heard a Louisiana number that's based on.
So perhaps if we had a data system that we could longitudinally track children, we could get there. And I know that that has been something that we've all talked about for a number of years. And I know it's something that, I mean, I've heard Malin and Karen talk like this would be a dream for them to have. And so, while at the same time we need to make investment to make sure more children have access to quality early care and education, we need to make a significant investment in the infrastructure of an early care and education system so that we're able to track longitudinal data, that we have a connectivity between our early childhood system data and our K-12 system data, which we don't have right now.
I'm gonna note that simply because, yes, facts are facts in terms of, PII.
Other states have that.
I would say there are
So it's
multiple.
not been done, obviously, so. Yeah.
I think it sounds like there are definitely some experts that were participating in this commission task force and others through the Blanco Center and other that are hard at work. It doesn't necessarily live in the early childhood care space simply because those are private businesses. So it is very unique in the space as it relates to early childhood care and education. But I definitely, Dr. Barnes is not present here in the room, but probably could speak much more in depth as it relates to some of the effort that's underway as we think about the K-12 to higher ed pipeline. And so I cannot speak to that over, there's multiple layers, and I want to keep us on pace, acknowledging that we're still on page 2, and I'm grateful for the rich discussion and feedback as it relates. I am still hearing the thread of some emphasis on the educational component, but still emphasizing the economic impact. And so with that, I'm now going to transition us to the section that is getting there, closing the gap for a strong early childhood care and education system on pages 2 and 3. And this particular section is that high-level overview of funding components in childcare from the vantage point of families to providers. And so this graphic that is on page 3 will be updated to be more reflective of the actual funding breakdown in Louisiana, as well as the removal of some graphic crumbs. So I'm going to pause there, but I am going to kind of accelerate us to the meat, which is the recommendations itself. Any strong feedback as it relates to pages 2 and 3 before we get into the recommendations, which is really where I want to guide us in that feedback. Okay. With that, I'm going to now transition us to the task force. This rich discussion today is really evident to so much of the discussion that the task force had, because there are so many different ways you can approach this. There are so many different ways you can talk about the benefits of early childhood care and education. And so one of the pieces of feedback that the task force suggested was breaking up the recommendations into short-term, intermediate, and long-term. And so we're going to talk right now about short-term. And I welcome those members of the task force to kind of infuse in the discussion that was had in particular, because they are the ones that really charged this, but also the discussion that y'all had last commission meeting as it relates to some of your feedback. So short term is thinking in the here and the now, and then the intermediate is in the longer, or probably if you're thinking your 3, 4, 5 years, and then your long term is probably your 10+ year runway. So in terms of your short-term recommendation, your recommendation 1 from the task force, and of course would be from this commission, is restoring state funding for Louisiana's Child Care Assistance Program to the fiscal year 24 level, which was 87.7 million. And so this would essentially return the funding for the CCAP program to its last fiscal year amount. And so I'll pause there for feedback as it relates to recommendation 1 for this commission.
I guess if we would return it to that level, just to get like data perspective, how many children would we still be looking at without some form of early childhood care education? Well, because I guess I'm trying to say it's great to get it back to that level, but I guess should we also have a more aspirational goal if the long, and maybe that's in a later recommendation. Okay, never mind, I'll be quiet.
This is your time for discussion. I by no means am saying to be quiet. There is a longer term recommendation that is kind of speaking to that, if any of the task force members or commission members wanted to speak to that. And Senator Mizell, did you have a point on that one?
It's gonna be really hard to bring that money back. We're cutting, we're throwing everything off the ship at this point.
Yeah, this may not be the number we all want, but it may be.
Want to acknowledge that it's going to be a tough sell to restore back to the 87. But if we don't name that and understand that when we're in session, that a lot of the discussion will probably be about maintaining what we do have, because we can't lose any more, because we already lost 9 million. I would imagine that would be a great deal of conversation in the Capitol in our session, our next session. So.
Libby, to that point, would it then strengthen the argument by including such and such number of children are already on the wait list? Just to put to people's attention, these are your constituents who are already waitlisted for the services, and this could potentially help.
And I was kind of going to touch on that a little bit. So just at our center, we have 57 parents on the wait list, and they have been on the wait list since June of 23. So I don't know if that number hits home for y'all, but these are parents who want to return to work, who want to go to school, but can't. 57 in one center, that's just one center in Avoyles, who have been on the wait list for more than a year and some odd months. So I don't know how you contextualize that for.
I'm wondering if we have data for every parish, because it would be interesting to have a kind of an addendum, just a flyer or just a page specific for each parish, or a page that shows
feel like
all the
that would
parishes
really
and then
help.
give each rep the data for his or her parish and say, you've got 200 kids who are on the wait list and their parents would love to go to work in your parish.
And I
We
think
do
that's
have
a
that
really
data
easy
available.
statistic to get
Yeah.
through the VOAs and through the Ready Start Network.
If we could get that close to the time of the legislative session, yeah, and individualize it.
And then not only that, so even if once they're on the wait list, once their number comes up, they have to then provide more documents. And if those documents are outdated, they might fall off. They might not even qualify anymore.
I do want to make sure for folks who might not be as familiar with the wait list, when we're talking, when we're talking about that number, if they are on the wait list, they have already been found eligible. They meet all requirements. The only thing preventing them from being served is the funding. So I just wanted to note that. So
and just to,
Jobs that they want to go work.
yeah,
You need to humanize
I mean,
that.
these are real people who
Parents, yep.
really want to work. And then, to kind of wrap that around, I have always been a center. We kind of just to fill y'all in, everybody probably knows our story, but our center, we just decided one day we were just going to start paying teachers what they deserved. And we went in and we're like, okay, we're going to utilize this COVID money and we're going to go all in. And every teacher makes between $15 to $19 an hour in our center. I unfortunately have had to let go 3 teachers because my center is down from those children who once were maybe approved for CCAP, now aren't. The restrictions of CCAP, like even if you're just a day late, you get kicked off, you have to start over. Like it's a really in-depth process. And we're talking about parents here who in our rural town may not have internet. That's like a real thing. Like
Yep.
we have a lot of parents who don't have internet. Like right now in Marksville, just to put this in perspective, right now in Marksville, AT&T network for phones and internet is completely down. No one has AT&T service and
Yep.
hasn't for 24 hours because AT&T is on strike. So in our town, that's half our town. So like if their paperwork is due, they can't get that in, which then kicks them out. And so it's this big cycle. And I don't want to take up time, but like there's real numbers that we could put to this to like really bring it home. So we're letting teachers go, so that's even increasing employment issues. I don't know, like it just comes full circle.
Do you have a community college in your area?
We don't. We have LSUA.
So these parents all want to go to work. They're not trying to go back to school.
Well, some,
Get that too?
yeah, some want to go back to school. They travel to LSUA. It's very close. We do have like CLTCCs, like some of these parents want to do that. But the back end of that is like they can't until CCAP, but then to cycle that back around, they also can't get CCAP until they have a job with pay stubs. So like it's this never ending cycle of parents cannot get back to work, and it's a struggle.
I guess for me, it goes, someone made the point earlier about this being an infrastructure type issue. Why we're not pushing the envelope is work. Because we can't get people in jobs until we get the children with some level of childcare. And for us, if that's the investment where we say we're losing this amount of money, I would see that we try to make some argument about workforce development, that it's not just about sending a child to a center, it's also about getting the parents back in the workforce and businesses coming in and hopefully funding to the local schools. Because I know I have a godson, the only reason he's in pre-K right now is because he's considered on the spectrum. And otherwise, they would have told his parents, figure it out as far as finding money to send him somewhere, and there's so many people who may not have that option to send their child to pre-K or have the money, or sometimes, very much, I come from a very rural area in Arkansas where most of us, we stayed at home with grandma, and that's all we had until we went to school. So, ending that, that narrative as well.
So feedback I heard was elevating potentially a line as it relates to the wait list itself, just acknowledging that that number is fluid at the time of submission, and then maybe closer to as it relates to that breakdown by parish. I'm going to move us to the next recommendation, which is at the bottom of page 3, recommendation 2. And this is definitely one for commission discussion as it relates to the Early Childhood Education Fund. And so the second recommendation is to appropriate at least $30 million to the Early Childhood Care and Education Fund to ensure revenue generating local parishes receive from their promised state match. And so for this is a placeholder recommendation. And so ultimately, it's the question is so parishes have been, this is the matching fund. And so for those communities at which that have been raising funds, this would be to essentially match that. This is an estimate based off of previous trends of those matching. And so I think the question to the commission is do you agree that 30 million is the appropriate ask here? And if not, what number would be more appropriate?
What was the ask last year? Or do we know what we spent last year?
This is the approximate amount that the local communities are raising right now
So this would, this would match what we're
for one
spending
more year.
for one more
It would
year.
allow for at least another year of funding.
So for like continuity of care.
Right. The ask in the February report was that there be legislation to codify that it would match whatever was raised locally, no matter the amount. So there wasn't a specific amount asked for in February.
And I think that's going to be, I mean, I know for our own community, I mean, we're out there, you know, bake sales and tin cups trying to raise money for this. And so I think a lot of communities have figured this out. And so I think the expectation is that that number is going to be larger. And so I think if there's a way to either tie it to demand or increase it, you know, 0.5x above whatever the demand was, because I think the question of if you don't have enough money, then how do you start to prioritize, has a potential to dampen some of the enthusiasm for participation.
And that's absolutely true. We've seen it grow from 7 participating community, I'm sorry, from 3 to 7 to 13. So it has jumped each year because they've seen it working.
Question for I'm sorry,
But
Libby.
also, real quick, I would say that right now with the revenue sources that are going into the fund, it's generating about 13 million a year. So that 13 million is not enough to cover what we have. And we had that one-time investment of, over $40 million, a couple of years ago. So the majority of the money that's in the fund is really from a one-time investment. So.
Have they expressed any support on this, or is there any, what is it? The Municipal Association. Is there some, besides us pitching it to the municipals, is there some network that is approaching them from the aspect of revenue and economy, that this is a forward-thinking thing for an area to do?
So, at least in Caddo, it's all private money. There was some initial seed money from the municipality, but the municipality hasn't participated to a large degree for a while. So I don't know if that's true in other communities or not.
When the legislators are reading this and they see that we're getting 30 million in one and however much we ask for in the other, are they kind of looking at it as one lump sum, like, are we robbing Peter to pay Paul?
Would I get back? Because I was just talking to somebody this week. They give me the total.
Mm-hmm.
They don't break this down at all. Well, look at, we're spending gazillions on, and they have the number, and I can't, of exactly what they see it as, like, we don't need to give that anymore.
I was, just to give you some quick feedback, I was in a meeting yesterday with the Rapides Foundation, which, does a lot of great work all across Sunlaw. And they have a large donation that they're trying to think of how they're going to maximize their money. So they've offered the smaller rural parishes who have never been able to get into this game, that they would do a match that we then in turn would give to the state for the state to do a match if we privately fundraise. So we would be successful in doing that, but I am nervous that there's not going to be enough funding. And then in that conversation, we just started to talk about, like, we're really not doing early ed well yet. And maybe this matching fund is taking too much money away from childcare for all and just pulling it to the cities that are able to really, bang pots and pans and do this. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, but I just wanted to share that because that's our discussion in
I'm
San
rural
Juan.
as well.
Yeah,
And that's a
mhm.
concern I have.
Yeah.
That how do we break the cycle of rural Louisiana if we're
Mhm.
putting all of our money into the urban areas?
Correct.
I think one of the challenges, and I just did the math based on the numbers in the report, but if you take $8,739 times 78,000, that's $681,642,000 a year.
Glad you're in this group.
But we're talking about, 100 million, and we're literally talking about, 600 or 700 million a year to get to the number we're talking about. So I think the idea of a matching fund or raising money at the local level is not an overall sustainable program. We have to look at a way of retooling the system. And there are other states that are doing it differently. I also think there's probably, just given the conversations that happened in the last legislative session, there's not significant appetite among the legislators to quadruple or quintuple the number, the ask on an annual basis. There's probably not the appetite nor the funding to do it. And so is there a way to leverage state dollars that do exist to expand the payer community to engage in building up this capacity within the state?
So were you referring to recommendation 2, correct?
I guess I'm.
As
I'm
well
refer-
as recommendation 4?
I'm referring to both short, medium, and long term.
Got it.
Right, and so just looking at, I mean, if we're talking all,
Yep.
then what's the number for all? And then how do we back into, so if that's the goal, then how do we back into that? And so so does the 100 million to Melissa's point, does the 100 million help get us there? Or is that literally we're putting $100 million finger in the dike every year just to keep the dam from breaking? And if so, what does that mean from a strategic standpoint to how we think about the long-term capacity? If it's going to get more expensive and the number of children are going to continue to increase, is holding the line the best strategy long-term? Or do we need to be having a different, as we're dealing with the current day, is there a longer term strategic conversation we need to be having about the infrastructure conversation about how do we prepare for the potentiality that we're going to ultimately get to all kids? Or are we basically going to say we're going to serve as many kids as we can for as long as we can, and that's what we're focused on?
I feel like if the chair says it, the chair says it. I mean,
That's what we're trying to do. That's our goal. That's our goal. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I want to bring us back to recommendation 2 as it relates to the amount, the 30 million for the ECE fund. An agreement on the amount itself as a minimum. If not, we will go to the third, and this is again, just the short term. We need to get to the intermediate. Is the third is, kind of several of this was alluded to earlier as less on the funding component, but more as serving as.
Before we move on,
I would like to say something too.
the recommendation is the 30 million as a minimum, or what we need based on what the ask is, or what people are raising, right?
So kind of changing the language to be more dependent upon, so
demand.
we'll know a better idea of really where the local matching is around the January timeframe. The sequencing of this report, of course, is due in September. And so you're saying to add language to the report as it relates to 30 million or what had
Based on the
been
demand.
previously raised?
Yeah.
Understood.
Could we also maybe, would it be helpful to add a sentence about what that, matching that funds and making early childhood in our parish, we raise 4.8 million, and putting early childhood in the news and putting early childhood in front of people, because the goal is right for everybody in our community to get invested, all of our businesses and companies. So like, would it be helpful to kind of put that, putting early childhood in the forefront of the important work we're doing in our parishes, in our communities is so important to get that local investment, because the goal is right for more of our local communities to be able to stand up and join together too, because it takes a village, right? So we don't need not only state funds, but local funds too.
Yeah,
So
and that
would
is
it be
the inherent nature of that fund. It is that matching element. So yes. The next one does also the next recommendation is serving as a vocal champion to help educate state, local, and economic development agencies and organizations about the benefits of early childhood care and education. And so that really kind of brings in several of the points discussed earlier. It's not funding specific, but it is continuing to emphasize serving as those vocal champions. All right, I'm going to move us to the intermediate recommendations. And so this next one is definitely for conversation for this commission as it relates to a recommendation, which is recommendation 4, which is investing an additional 98 million of state funds annually for the next 10 years to gradually grow and sustain total state investment each year. And so for this recommendation, that is that appropriation of 98 million for the next 10 years. And as a reminder, when we began, Karen was recalling to y'all that this was also included in the February 2024 report. And so this is definitely for conversation amongst this commission as it relates to this dollar amount and discussion there. Dr. Craig.
Just a quick question. It says here it's 98 million of state funds annually, but then you talk about a laddering up approach. I know at some point I remember, and this may be the commission before, but there was a certain amount this year and then we would go up a little bit the next year. And I remember a laddering up approach, but if we're asking for 98 every year, how does that laddering up approach fit?
So I'll defer to the task force, but task force members, my understanding, it was that laddering up approach. It was a 98 and then another 98 and then, but task force members, please let me know if I'm misinterpreting.
And that has been the notion of the task force and commission since its beginning. I think feedback we've received is that to put that total 10-year amount in here feels very overwhelming
I got you.
for the
Thank you.
audience.
So just so I'm doing the math right, so the first year is 98, the second year is 190, the third year is 270 or whatever. Okay.
You're adding 98 each year? I don't think that's clear from the statement.
That's my question.
Oh,
I think
that
I
wasn't
was-
clear to
I
me
think I
either.
was thinking you were saying 98.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's why I was confused with the laddering up statement, because I think a laddering.
I think the
up, like,
intention of
amount.
the task force members was additional 98.
Until
Welcome your
980
feedback.
million.
Welcome your feedback to that amount. Yes. So year 10 would be the 978 million.
The feedback we received in the prior year report, so originally in 2023, we were asking for 115 million per year for a total of 1.15 billion at the end of 10 years. Now with the additional funding given by the legislature, we were able to decrease that to an ask for 98 million. But it was perceived that that was a very large figure that was not always well received.
No, I understand. And I do now that I'm taken away from the highlighted section, I see invest an additional 98 million, but I'm not sure it's reading exactly the way that y'all are saying it's reading. I don't know how to fix it yet, but I'll think about
I
it.
think that's really up to this commission of whether or not you would like it to read that way. That is ultimately the commission's discussion.
I think with a visual, it would be pretty clear. Just adding that on the side, and then I think that would help clarify the language potentially. There was that beautiful graph in previous ones that showed what the laddering up looked like, that, indicated how many children were being served, and that was so powerful to see.
Mm-hmm. There is that graphic. Yeah, okay.
Great. So feedback I'm hearing from that is to more clearly spell out that this commission is asking for that in 10 years, that building amount. And so I think, again, there's that the feedback of this is your commission report and your preference on that.
I would say yes, but with the focus on serving more children, not the money in that graphic, if that makes sense. Like, I think when you say that number, it's very scary to people. So I absolutely don't think we should say that number because as soon as we do, they stop reading. But if you focus the graphic, I'm trying to remember which report that was in. But if you focus the graphic more on building on children's capacity and not funding capacity, it's then inherent that you need more money. So I would not put that final number. That was the discussion that I recall on the task force, to focus on the kids and not the money. And then inherently you need more money.
So pulling in information as it relates to the number of children served. Okay. If there is no further discussion, I am going to continue to move us along to recommendation 5, which ties back to the components of recommendation 2, which is based off of codifying the state's annual ECE fund match into law. And so this would guarantee that the state would match the amount of money generated by local parishes. So pause there for any feedback as this is an intermediate and builds off of recommendation 2.
I'm sorry to move us back, but Tim, now that we're on number 4, can you explain what you were saying earlier about the long-term goal?
Sorry. So right now, I mean, just to cover every child at the numbers that we're talking about is $690 million a year. So with inflation and everything, that would get there. I think that the challenge is going to be, you're talking, 1/40th of the state's budget, right? At current numbers is $1 billion. And so it strains credulity to think that we would be able to get there using this kind of incremental process with only state dollars, only state general fund dollars. And so I think from a long-term capacity, and as we engineer backwards from that large number, are there other models out there that we need to be looking at that, that bring in other payers, that look at grading funding, that look at a whole range of other options that may include states, may include localities, may include the business community, may include parents, and being more circumspect about what that really is going to be. I think there's aspiration and there's futility. And so I guess the question is where does this fall? And where does getting $980 million out of the general fund on an annual basis fall? Is that aspirational or is that futility? And I unfortunately think it's probably closer to the latter than the former. And so if that's the case, I think we can advocate for it. But I think in the long-term conversation, we have to talk about the kind of structural reforms that other states are looking at that bring in a broader base of payers and create a different kind of calculus for what this means for the economic health of the state.
So I wonder, like, if that's a broader yes to all of it, but if that perhaps gives us something to think about for a strategic direction as the commission moves forward too, because we're able to name the number that we need, with the number of children. And so instead of, we've got to get this done, I understand that. But as we move forward, like using that kind of lens of how do we get to the pieces of the whole for what we need for funding in different ways. Because you've got you have Michigan, you have Kentucky, Colorado that are doing some different models that have, it's called tri-share, but you've got business, families, and your state investment. And what would that look like in Louisiana? And that would be a dynamic conversation, I think, that for this group to have.
Two observations. Number one, just as a point, this is about 25% of the MFP program you're talking about. So it's going to be a difficult sell to a legislature that's funding MFP from K through 12, and you're only talking about 0 through 3 or so. And it's about 25% of the money. Number two, though, when you talk about these kind of figures, your argument is that on the first page, childcare issues results in a 1.3 billion annual loss in Louisiana's economy, but you're talking about spending 1.3 roughly between the local matches and so forth. So you have no return on investment. It's flat. In other words, you're gonna save 1.3 in the economy, but you're gonna spend 1.3 to save 1.3. Just a point.
Karen, help me here with Dr. Bustamante did a graphic that said if we didn't make investment, our economy over 10 years would lose, was it 12.1 billion? But if we did make the investment, we would have a 1 point something billion gain over 10 years or
A
something.
larger gain. So I think that this 1.3 is only looking at, maybe we need to frame it more carefully. It's only looking at the losses that employers are facing from families not having stable, reliable childcare. It does not show the full return on investment that comes from the reduced savings of remediation, criminal justice issues, this all added
I'm a
together.
legislature and I'm reading this document.
The
I'm
numbers
seeing
don't add
1.3
up.
savings and 1.3 cost. I have no rate of return.
Right.
So it's a problem in the document.
Yeah.
Maybe there could be some, I don't know, comparison statement added based on what Libby's saying, so that maybe that's clear for someone who doesn't know. But I think, moving to recommendation number 5, I guess because I'm thinking during session, there was a lot of bills, so, and I tried to sleep somewhere in between that. I thought there was a bill last year that was brought with the attempt to codify the matching fund. I guess and maybe I made this up because I wanted it to happen, but if it did, I guess I'm trying to remember what was maybe the argument against it, and making sure that that point is addressed. If we're gonna say this in the report, we address it, say if a legislator is reading it, so that we don't hear the same argument again. Or maybe, there's my question there.
I think your question makes sense. I don't remember there being such a bill
Okay,
brought.
maybe I made that up.
It was absolutely a recommendation of the commission in February, so that may be what you're thinking of.
It sounds like there is support for this recommendation continuing. Mr. Tipton, there's a spot right there and there's a spot right there if you were looking for a seat. I'm going to now move us to recommendation 6, which is build local capacity to generate revenue for early care and education. And so this again is going back as it relates to local parishes in terms of generating capacity, some of the conversation that was had earlier as it relates to multiple revenue streams. And then there's also this text pullout box as it relates for workforce compensation. So I'll pause there. This one is much broader, if you will, and I'll definitely let task force member chime in as it relates to local capacity and generating revenue for early childhood care and education. Thank you, Representative Freiberg, for your time. Any feedback as it relates to recommendation 6? Some rich discussion that has got your brain is just churning. So let me rephrase. Are there any opposition? Because it sounds like a lot of discussion has already been had as it relates to emphasizing that local match and return.
What I would like to see, based on what we were just saying about trying to get out of the box we're in, is to do more than the capacity to generate revenue, the capacity to use existing structures. I don't mean physical structures exactly, but to use systems that are in place that could be shifted in purpose. So I think we're going to have to really be open-minded about it. I think of community colleges a lot. That's just,
We're working on it.
okay. So, but I'd rather see, if I just don't want to keep hounding on the revenue.
Okay.
I want to think that we're being creative with what could be an opportunity.
So I don't mean to go backwards because I know we're in a time crunch, but I'm churning on number 5. And to put it into law means permanent. And are we constantly going to be taking from CCAP funding to put it into that pot, therefore not providing early ed, to the greater good because we're robbing Peter to pay Paul? So like that wording, put it into law. I guess I'm not sure on this ECE match program because the more people that come in, the more funding it's going to need. We're not getting more funding realistically. So where is that funding going to come from? So when it is in law, like that is permanent. There is no coming back from that. So I don't know. I'm struggling with that one a little bit because I don't know if we will be able to keep up with that money. Like Rapides, she just mentioned, that's a new one coming in, 4.1 million. Avoyelles is coming in. All of these people are coming into this fund and the money has to come from somewhere. So when it's law, that's like a whole other ballgame. So I don't know about that one.
I mean, I think that's a very good point, Melissa, that I appreciate you raising for the commission to reflect on and think about, do you have those same concerns? And do you want that recommendation to remain in here, or does that raise a different perspective for you?
Just one point that follows on that point, and I hate to put him on the spot, but Mr. Thomas is here from the governor's office, and I'd suggest before we would publish this, that we'd spend some time with the governor and Mr. Thomas and the other staff people and try to align strategies. Because it's one thing to publish a document that might be dead on arrival, and another to actually try to do something that you might be able to pull off. So that'd just be a suggestion. I hate to put you on the spot.
Could you just cap that? Could you just cap certain parishes? I mean, at a line, so this could go into law? Could you just, because the whole goal is to once local communities rise up, that maybe, could you just cap parishes off? So it could be something that could still be, made into law? Just a thought.
Well, if you use the model we were talking about earlier, where it's the greater of the amount raised or this number, then it helps to avoid the question of having a specific codification with regard to a number. So it's based on the amount that you raise. So the communities that raise it are able to take advantage of it. I mean, I don't know how long this is sustainable when you talk about straight philanthropy. And so I think it may be something that, unless we can maintain this energy, or unless there's additional incentives that are created, some of the philanthropic, if there's no return on the philanthropic investments, I don't know how sustainable they are long-term. That's my only concern. If there are other models that you can use for match dollars, but as long as it's straight philanthropy, I think that's going to be difficult to sustain.
I have a question. So is the ECE fund taken away from the CCAP dollars?
They are two separate awards made in the state appropriations, but I think, Melissa, you can certainly express it better than I. It's your point, but I think Melissa's point is that if the legislature is thinking, like Senator Mizell said, about a total investment that they're willing to make for early childhood, and if they are required by law to match what's been raised locally, they may stick with what's in their mind as that capped total investment and then reduce the amount for regular CCAP.
I think that's fair. Like, based on conversations that we've been a part of, like, that's fair, because it's been like, well, if I don't put it here, I'll just put it there. And, we've run into situations where we thought we were going to get something in the fund, and they're like, we're not touching that because we just gave you CCAP funds.
But I believe they're looking at it as a whole number, and how we choose to divide it as a commission, then it's divided, is my interpretation of what's happening.
To build the confidence that we've got a majority of people in government who do want to sustain it, who want to grow it and sustain it. And that's the wiggle room we're at right now. I'm just wondering, totally, the opioid settlement money, are, isn't that available for this? Why aren't we pushing locals to use opioid settlement money for early childhood? Have you?
Had some initial conversations, and as that went on, that there wouldn't be enough to even invest in early childhood.
Because I know a lot of locals that it's like they're going through the Christmas catalog as a kid, trying to find something to spend the money on. And if we got in front of that with maybe, anyway, sorry.
Putting a pin, it sounds like some locals have done some research. Sounds like there was not enough generated to be able to use. I'm going to get us to our last recommendation if there's no further conversation as it relates to recommendation 6. It sounds like there's still some conversation as it amounts to the amounts. I'm sorry, go for it, Thomas, or Marcus.
I just wanted to respond to Mr. Apel, just let him know that I've been attending every meeting I could possibly attend and setting up meetings with different organizations so that when the governor's policies team start meeting, all y'all concerns and things that need to happen is brought to the table. So I'm definitely on that, and we're definitely going to continue to partner and move forward. So it's a great suggestion, and I'm on it. Appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. The long-term recommendation is specific. As Karen mentioned at the start, there was a task force that has been meeting, really kind of diving into specifically recommendation 7. This commission did engage in some conversation as it related to at its July meeting. Recommendation 7 is specific to adopting a funding formula that provides predictable, sufficient, and stable funding for a strong ECE system each year. And then it goes on to spell out specifically what that funding formula should do. And so acknowledging that that is a long-term recommendation, wanted to open it up for discussion as it relates to recommendation 7.
I have a question. So am I understanding correctly that the task force is tasked with designing the formula?
I'll look back at this slide. The legislation itself,
They're tasked with exploring ideas for revenue generation and access expansion. And so the actual legislation in 2023, I believe, added a charge that there be a formulary created. And
Oh.
so the task force has been working with an external entity to discuss what should maybe be considered for that formulary.
I'm just curious if the commission report should say design and adopt, or as opposed to just adopt.
I'm open to adding design and adopt, or I should say, if the commission is open to adding a design and adopt, we can add that language.
I agree.
Okay.
What would be the timeline on designing and adopting that formulary?
This is a long-term recommendation. I welcome any of the commission members or task force members that participate in that discussion to chime in on that particular element.
Michael, was a discussion around it being like long-term being 3 to 5 years?
I really appreciate that quality is mentioned in the first bullet point. I think that's an excellent thing to draw people's attention to.
Silence from the perspective of taking time to consider, or silence from the perspective of no opposition as it relates to that recommendation. Okay. So I know we're coming towards the end of the report. We are at the end at the report. I'll say that. We are at the end. And I am grateful for the feedback that has been provided. We've been taking a lot of notes, acknowledging that we are going to be working to incorporate as many items of feedback as possible. If you do not mind, Senator Mizell, I may just go ahead and recap some of the feedback given. And I just want to acknowledge that what we're going to do in a moment, and I will, and maybe this could also not buy some time, but allow for if there are any public comments to be made before we move for a motion on this item. If you have a public comment as it relates to this item, because next we will be moving for a motion on this item, I do ask that you complete a public comment card. In a minute, Senator Mizell will call on that. So while if you are filling out a public comment cards, I'm going to summarize some of the feedback that I've heard. So the feedback as it relates to page 1 will be incorporating some elements as it relates to emphasizing education and those foundational skills. So adding a sentence or two as it relates to that. Some feedback as it relates to some of the pulling out of the graphics, really making sure those bullets stand out, adding some language as it relates to the impact to employers on that first page. In the second page, there was some feedback as it relates to incorporating an element of kindergarten readiness and the impact that it has to our communities on the K-12 side. And then on the third page, feedback as it relates to recommendation 1, specifically as it relates to adding waitlist information, acknowledging that there is some variation, and there are also the ideas shared as we get closer to legislative session, our agency providing the wait list by parish, which is information that is available to us. And then as it relates to page 4, definitely some conversation as it relates to recommendation 6 in terms of building that local capacity. It sounds like for recommendation 4, forgive me, I'm going backwards, emphasizing once you got to that 10-year investment, the number of children served, emphasizing that number. And I'm going quickly and I'm looking at my feverishly written notes. There may be a few points that I missed. And then on the page 5, it's adding language as it relates to the recommendation to design and adopt. Now, I went through rather quickly, simply because I'm trying to capstone and make sure we captured as much. I know there's a few I missed, but is there any other large items missed in that summary? Okay, I think Senator Mizell, you're good to call for any public comments at this time. I don't know if we have any. I haven't seen any filled out.
Is there anyone who, excuse me, does have a public comment or a card to turn in? Well, looks like we don't have any public comment. And I think at this point, we've all had the opportunity to digest and discuss the draft in that form. I want to appreciate everybody's comments, their attendance, and the commission members can now allow for the LDOE, the great people here who have a lot of patience to make edits on the final version, but we would need a motion to allow that to move forward. We have a motion from Ms. Perkins and a second from Ms. Charles. Are there any more questions or comments from the members at this point? Well, I want to thank you all again. The motion passes, and the next item is for informational purposes and is to spotlight early childhood in action with the work of 2 members of the commission. Participating today is Dr. Misty Perry-Lassane. Is that right? Back there? Yeah. With Nicholls State University, and Rochelle Wilcox from Wilcox Academy at Southern in New Orleans. To facilitate this panel, I'm going to transition to Malin Baker to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Senator Mizell. Missy, if you would like to have a spot up here for you, I will, I'll defer to the chair. So ultimately, we wanted y'all to spend as much time as possible talking about this report. And I'm so excited that we spent as much time as we did. Originally, we had designed with 2 of your commission members a panel to talk about partnerships that are underway. And I'm acknowledging that 15 minutes is a very hard amount of time to get a really robust panel. And so what I'm going to ask if Senator Mizell, if you're okay with it, I may just do a very abridged version from the perspective of ask one question. And since they are commission members, this is going to be a great taste of what's to come at our next commission meeting, where we're really going to talk about partnership in action. There's been some great discussion today as it relates to different partnerships that are underway, whether they be at various community levels in terms of raising funds or partnering with businesses. This particular panel was originally designed to talk about partnerships within the community or at a higher ed institution. And so we're going to do, ladies, if you're okay with it, Rochelle and Dr. Lassane, we're going to do one question, and it's going to be your preview of the next commission meeting, where we're going to dive in and talk about some other national practices as it relates to partnerships that are underway. And then we'll probably build. This will give us some time to add a few more people to this panel. And so with that, I first want to just ask our two members just to introduce themselves and tell us who they have our partnerships with. And then I'm going to capstone it with one more question, and then we're going to end promptly at 3 p.m. So Rochelle, I'll start with you.
Rochelle Wilcox. I am the CEO and Executive Director of Wilcox Academy. We have 3 early learning centers, but our partnership is with Southern University in New Orleans at their New Orleans campus.
I am Dr. Missy Lassane. I'm the Executive Director of Early Childhood Initiatives for Nicholls State University. I oversee our center on campus, Little Colonels Academy, and then I also oversee the West Ascension Early Learning Center in Donaldsonville through our partnership with Ascension Parish Government.
Great. And so the one question I'm going to ask, and then we're going to wrap up, is what are some of the benefits that you're seeing of the partnership? And then if you want to infuse, I'm so sad because we had some great questions about student success stories as well as family success stories that we're not going to get to, but what are some of the benefits of that partnership?
So the benefit of the partnership is that, one, we're on a university campus, so you get to see birth through college. And we get to have the university practicum students come inside the classroom. We also have, the school has a social work department. They have the School of Nursing, so we get to have those full wraparound services at the university level. We also get to, I was a working parent, I was in school, so we get to have that experience where if one of the students want to come have lunch with their kid, they have that experience, which is amazing. We get that point, which CCAP helps, where it is, I want to work my way out of poverty, right? So that is the piece of being on the campus. We get to experience when we're talking about community helpers, and one of the engineers come from the university. They're like, oh, we know you're maintenance. And they're just like, are the trucks around there? They're like, so it's all of those things by being on the university campus, our kids get to experience. So that is one of those are some of the things that we really enjoy by being on a university's campus.
I can go on all day, so I'm gonna try and keep it as short as possible. I think a lot of the benefits we experience in West Ascension is the level of support, especially all of the community leaders really coming together, from the sheriff to parish government to the mayor of the area, and really reinvesting juvenile justice dollars into the children of early childhood. So through the reallocation of juvenile justice funds, they were able to support funding this center. And so currently we have 50 children enrolled. All of them are receiving some type of financial support. We worked with Ascension Parish to develop their own subsidy program. So while these families are navigating through CCAP and waiting on being on the wait list, they are still able to tap in some financial support from Ascension Parish government. And so that has been tremendous. We were able to have a lot of our children start early step services. Just in the short 4 months that we've been operational, we've gone from 2 children receiving early steps to close to 20 that are either receiving early steps, being referred, currently being evaluated. And so the partnership has been a great partnership. and we have big plans, especially in a partnership between government who has the funding and then a university who has those additional resources that can be brought in. And so, just very summarized.
It was the same thing for us as far as the funding is concerned. So in New Orleans, we have the millage, which was something that we were able to pass in 2022. So in addition to that, which is the city funding, but we were able to prioritize the SUNO students. So if you are a SUNO student, they get priority on that. All they have to do is say that, yes, I'm a SUNO student. They show that they have their transcript, and they go to the front of that line. So that means that they don't have to worry about, oh, how am I going to pay my tuition or my rent or anything else? They get priority as a SUNO student. So it is one of those things that is exciting about having that funding and not have to worry about being on a wait list for childcare assistance as well. So thank you for reminding.
Can I add a few things? Because of course, we at the Board of Regents are so excited about these programs and what they've done. And each is a little bit different, both tapping into local funds. I think it was very innovative to use the juvenile justice funds so that instead of using it for incarceration for juveniles, we're going to use those funds to prevent that from even happening. But one other piece that Misty didn't say is that in their center and in the building that they refurbished, there's affordable housing on the top 2 levels of where the center is in the bottom level. So really excited about that in regards to Nichols. And Nichols isn't just in Ascension. I think y'all are about to expand into Assumption as well, or another parish. They're working to expand outside of the Nichols region. And one more comment about what the phenomenal job that Dr. Wilcox has done in her area. Oh, here, I'm sorry. I'm here.
Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. Is saw a need that SUNO did not have a child care center, but there was empty space on the campus that they could refurbish to use to not only benefits SUNO students, but many of you may or not know that UNO is like literally across the street from them. And so those UNO students can use that as well as faculty and students, but we're certainly faculty and community members, but we're also really focusing on students. So I just needed to add a little bit to what they were going to say. They really exceptional work on both sides. Sorry, that's enough.
No, it was a perfect bookend because I am sad that we didn't get to really go into much more detail, but all that's to say is I hope that you join us at our next commission meeting. In just a few slides, we'll show we haven't shared those dates yet. We're finalizing the best dates for Senator Mizell and Representative Freiberg, and then we'll be following up with y'all. But our next meeting, we will be talking in much more detail about some of those existing partnerships in the state of Louisiana. We'll also have a few additional members join. And so I want to say thank you to 2 of our commission members. I know we were short on time, but this is a great preview of what's to come as we really spotlight some of those early childhood in action and the various ways you can approach this work. Before we adjourn, I wanted to share with you, this is the very draft version of the graphic design. We really wanted today to be focused on the conversation of the content and knew that if we did the graphic, you'll notice that this version is very drafty because there is some language that was since changed in the Microsoft Word version. I would say ultimately, everyone has a different way they approach graphic design. We got some feedback for some additional recommendations. And so I just want to pause there to see, are there any major concerns with this particular layout that maybe are our fastest and most efficient way to take feedback? But we wanted to share with you where the direction is headed. So any major concerns, or let me flip this. Are there any positive feedback on this?
Yes, it's laid out very well. It's pleasing to the eye. There may be a few tweaks with colors, but this when someone opens this, you might get a shot at reading those big boxes rather than this just long text. So this is definitely a step in the right direction when it comes to presenting the information that you have.
How do you say no to that?
I hope you can't. So, I definitely think it needs to be graphically designed like this.
Yeah, I think it looks great. The only concern I would have is I think the black and the pied don't really work together, but
Okay.
it makes it hard to read.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it looks great.
Do the legislators mostly receive this digitally or print or both? Because I noticed there's some links in here that link to more information. So
Get
I
it
believe-
digitally. but-
most people probably read it digitally rather than in print.
In a previous meeting, I believe we spoke about possibly having QR codes in there that people can scan. Do you all remember that?
I would think Education Committee would have it in paper format in hand. Hmm. When you go to committee for finance, you'll have it. Yeah, you would. I'm sorry. But as we're concluding the agenda today, does anybody have any questions or comments? I think we've covered a lot of things. Everybody's been very patient. Is there any public comment at this point? Does anyone have anything they'd like to say about, do you have a card, Miss Bishop? You may need to introduce yourself. I'm sure no one knows who you are.
Hello, Cindy Bishop, Child Care Association, Louisiana. The report looks great, but I was thinking once it gets to the committee, House and Senate Education Committee, maybe you and Barbara can ask for a hearing where y'all can present it so that it's not just tossed aside. And maybe for the appropriations in the Senate Finance too, so that we're getting the word out. That's my only suggestion.
I think it's helpful if we have one of the human stories present at the table to say what that's meant. So I think that's very helpful. But we'll have more information, I think, coming from the staff here based on the content that we've looked at and the changes to be made prior to the next meeting. And so at this point, I do need a motion to adjourn. Libby Sonia makes the motion second. Mary Beth Hughes makes the second. And on that note, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, guys.